Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's virtual tour brought to you by Region 9 and the Kemp Center for the Arts with support from the Pretty Foundation. From historical movies, the History Channel, and Renaissance fairs, we clearly enjoy escaping to times long gone by to see what life was like back then. But have you ever considered trying it out for yourself, learning how to be a knight or how to cook without modern conveniences, or what kinds of entertainment existed in, say, the 1400s in Italy? Where does a person even begin? Well, on a May day in 1966 in Berkeley, California, a group of people got together for a historically themed party, which began with a grand tournament. Participants dressed in costume with helmets and protective gear and battled each other with swords, foils, and padded maces. From the small gathering, a worldwide phenomenon known as the Society for Creative Anachronism was born. Today, we'll talk with two local members of the group and see footage of a recent event held here in town known as Queen's Champion, to see what it takes to immerse yourself in completely in the past. And our guests today are Chris Kane and Tamara Taylor. And there are titles in my script here for both of you that I can't pronounce. So I'm going to ask you to tell me, Chris, what's your title in this?
My title in the local group is Seneschal.
Seneschal.
It's roughly the equivalent of a chapter president.
Oh, okay. And what kind of duties is the president?
As little as I can get away with. No, seriously, I organize the meetings, make sure everything's flowing on track, assign duties, basically just keep things running smoothly.
How often do you meet?
We meet once a month for formal business meetings, but we have meetings for other events and things a little more frequently.
And Tamara, your title is what?
I'm the hospitaller. I'm basically the newcomer liaison, and it's my job to welcome in people who are new to the society and get them set up with garb and help them find their way.
And you have garb?
Yes.
Do you make these? Do you buy them? Is there a...
We make most of our garb.
Really?
Yes.
Fascinating.
Some of us aren't quite as talented, so we either beg other people to make it for us. Or there are a lot of options out there for buying it if you don't have that skill set.
It's the internet, right? You can find pretty much anything on the internet.
And usually at any of our events, there's merchants selling things as well. So.
Okay. So it's called the Society for Creative Anachronism. Explain what that is, Chris, and then from then forward, I'm just going to call it the SCA.
That would be probably a good idea. That's
okay, good. Explain what it is.
Well, and a lot of it's tied up in that anachronism part. We, first and foremost, are students of history. We're interested in how life was. We stretch back anywhere from Elizabethan times are really the cutoff, 1600 time frame, but we stretch from that all the way back through most of recorded history. We have people playing Vikings, we have people playing out of and researching roles from Egypt, Rome, Spain.
So it can be anytime?
Anytime, pretty much anytime prior to, like I said, about 1600 or so. That's really our cutoff when guns really entered the picture and cannons and really kind of changed the face of the world.
Why is that time interesting to you, as opposed to colonial America or ancient Chinese, or why did you pick this?
I have always been interested in the Middle Ages and medieval history. My persona is from the 10th century Iceland, and I have always been interested. This is what we would consider term Viking garb. The culture has always attracted me, and that's where I found it and fell in love with it.
So it almost sounds like you didn't choose it, it chose you.
It did choose me very much.
Really?
Yes, I've been in since I was 13.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, you just saw something one day and went, that's for me.
Yes.
And how about you?
I actually started back in Indiana in the late 90s with a group there. Set it aside for quite a while after I moved to Texas and just got caught up in life and other things, and in the past few years got back involved. My interests have kind of jumped all over the place. When I was first starting out back then, it was 11th, 12th century English. Coming back now, I'm focusing more on Spain and the New World in the late 16th century, so late 1500s, and how we started to expand and influence at that point into this side of the world.
And in my notes here, part of the organization is broken up into a shire. What does that mean?
We have various levels for the groups based mainly on population. It goes from a canton down at the lower level where you have very few members. A shire stretches up to about 20 to 30 active members.
Okay.
And then the next level up would be a barony, which is, again, you're looking anywhere from 70, 100 members in there that are working on a regular basis. We have baronies there's a barony in Lawton. There are 2 or 3 baronies in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. There's one in Lubbock. So from there, then it jumps up to the principality, which is obviously, much bigger. The name kind of implies that.
Okay.
It's multiple baronies that have come together and said, okay, we're not quite ready to completely be our own entity, but we're getting close. And then the top level is the kingdom level. There's about almost 24 kingdoms throughout the world that the population is big enough they can stand completely on their own, support themselves financially. We are a nonprofit, so everything we do has to come from, donations from the members, basically.
Okay.
So have enough of a population to support those events and keep things going and have enough people there to do things.
Okay, so what I was about to say, and I think you answered the question, but it sounds like in a given location, the name or the category is determined by the number of people who are interested in that location.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And so do those groups cross-pollinate, for lack of a better term? Does a group here go up to Lawton, which you said I think it's a little bigger?
All the time.
You do?
All the time.
You all get
We support each other. All the groups will travel to another one's event to support them. This past event that we're talking about, Queen's Champion, we had members from South Texas come up. We had members from Northern Oklahoma come down.
Wow.
So
it sounds like there's at least some economic impact to a location if you all gather from all around in one spot. You need a hotel and you go to restaurants and things like that. Yeah, that's interesting. So each location or each group has a king and queen, it says here. How does that work?
The king and queen, we decided, and this is all based all the way going back to the history you were talking about, way back in California when they first got together and started it. They started a tradition of trial by arms to determine who would lead things for a predetermined period of time.
Now that sounds like a fight.
It's a fight. It's a tournament. Now, it's not quite the fight that you're seeing on the screen right now. This is what we call light combat, using the steel swords. The combat we're talking about for king and queen is a little more aggressive. It uses slightly different weapons and different armor, and it is more equivalent to what you would see if you were to watch the movie Camelot or Excalibur, the knights in heavy armor ideal. And there's a tournament, and whoever wins the tournament gets to spend 6 months on the throne.
Oh.
And then their consort becomes either the, king or queen, depending on who wins the tournament. It can be either male or female that wins. You can have queen by right of arms just as easily as king by right of arms. That is actually our king and queen on the screen right now.
Okay. And is this local, or is this somewhere else?
This was this last weekend.
This last weekend, okay.
Because the tournament was for her champion, they came up for the weekend here.
And what does that mean for her champion?
And the person that defends her honor for the 6 months that she is queen.
Okay, we saw a little sword battle there. Compare what we saw, and obviously there's a safety concern. Describe what it is and how you win, or who decides the winner, and then compare that to what would have happened back in the day.
In some regards, and for what we saw this weekend with the light fighting that we're looking at here, it's similar to some degree. We try very hard to learn the original style, study the original masters and the books they left behind as far as technique.
So there are rules to these.
There are very specific rules.
Really?
We've always, one of the funny things I've always loved, statements I've loved going all the way back to when I was a teenager getting involved with this, is that we don't want to hurt anybody, we just want to kill them. We're not
that
out
seems
to...
backwards.
We're not out to cause harm in this.
Okay.
We basically use a point system, a touch system. If you get hit in the arm or the leg, you can't use that body part anymore.
Okay.
If you get hit in the torso or the head, you're done. You're dead. It's a very simple point system. You can see it in some of the fighting. The weapons we use, especially here for the rapier fighting, they are dull weapons.
Okay, I was going to ask that. They're real, but they're dulled at the end.
Yes, I've actually got one.
Oh, cool.
With me, and I don't know if it'll show up on the screen.
Wow.
But you can see the blade is dull. It's never been sharpened.
Okay.
The tips are rounded off, and they're covered with a rubber safety tip.
Okay.
And all the blades have to have a certain amount of flexibility.
Right.
So, yeah, we're making contact, but we're not out there to hurt anybody, hence that phrase.
And you said there's a point system.
Well, it's basically point as in if you get hit somewhere.
Right.
Different combats can be single elimination. They can be best 2 out of 3.
Okay.
And tournaments can be single limb, double limb, they vary from time to time.
And those are not original weapons.
No, these are modern reproductions.
And who does those? Where do you get those?
There are some private blacksmiths that work, but there are also 3 or 4 major companies that specialize in making swords for what we do.
Wow. And so the event here this past weekend, how does that come to be? How is it organized? How do people find out about it? Who comes? Just to give me an overview of that.
Somebody chooses to become an autocrat or an event steward.
Okay.
And we secure a location.
Where was it?
The Mascot Shrine.
Okay.
Here in town. We put out notification throughout the kingdom, inviting everybody to come. With it being,
how does that happen? Scrolls on horses, or is it use the internet?
We do use the internet.
Okay, so you're not Amish.
No.
Okay.
We do also occasionally mail out hand-painted scrolls, however.
Nice.
So the U.S. Postal Service still does the work for us.
Okay.
And we decide the activities of the day. This particular event was focused on a tournament for Her Majesty.
Okay, you mentioned that earlier.
And so we had people who were in charge of fighter support, providing them with water and Gatorade.
Oh. They had Gatorade in the 1400s.
We have Gatorade now.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. We had somebody providing us with a sideboard luncheon, which was a luncheon.
All right.
And there was also a bardic competition held.
What's that?
To choose the Kingdom Bard, which is a bard is a storyteller, a song.
Oh, sure.
Somebody who sings, does storytelling, poetry, or music. That was also held this particular weekend.
How many people locally were involved in that, and how many people showed up from around?
We had 24 people from here in the Wichita Falls area involved in setting up and running the day.
Okay.
Even for a single day event, it's pretty exhaustive getting everything done. And all total, we had 180 participants.
Wow.
Including our 24, but then about another 160 people show up from, as she said earlier, all over Texas and Oklahoma.
Who traveled the farthest?
I know we had some people from up there, Tulsa, and as far down as San Antonio. I don't know if we had anybody coming from farther than that.
Okay. And how far have each of you traveled to one of these events?
I think I win.
You've got me beat.
I win with that one. I attended a war in Pennsylvania.
A war? In
Yes,
Pennsylvania?
In Pennsylvania. It was a 22-hour drive.
Wow. That's dedication.
That was a long drive.
And maybe I'm wrong, but I think most people are familiar at some level with the colonial type battles that are reenacted back in Williamsburg. Is it like that kind of thing?
Similar in that we are recreating battles, but not necessarily specific battles.
Okay.
They may be recreating, a specific battle in history. We are providing new tournaments.
Because you're competing for things like who's the bard or who's the queen's...
Who's the queen's champion.
Champion.
Yes. Who chooses, when we choose to have our king and queen, we have a brand new tournament for them.
Okay.
So
although there is open warfare as well. That if you've ever watched the movie Braveheart, it looks very similar two sides just rushing together, and
Oh, really?
Yes.
it's that the war she was talking about.
Wow.
It's fairly world famous. Actually.
Really?
Yes.
20,000 people at its peak. I think last year you looked up
Last
how many
year,
people?
last year they clocked in over 13,000 people at that particular war.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's big enough that they actually set up their own post office. The post office sets up a post office.
Wow. So it goes on for a period of time.
2 weeks.
Oh, my goodness. Whereabouts in Pennsylvania?
Cooper's Lake, I believe, is.
Familiar with that. Okay, we'll come back locally then for a minute. We had the tournament here, and I guess we had a chance to visit with some people. Let's hear from them.
My name is Miles Ridley. I'm a 1573 Englishman. The reason I chose that in the SCA is because of the armor and the clothing that I could wear. I really wanted to fight with rapiers, which is kind of a 16th century game that we play here. And so I dressed to my weapon and choosing the style of cut in the doublet and the type of armor. This is actually Scottish morion, but there's a lot of battle wars going on at that time. So now I've got it. That's how I chose my persona.
My name is Aubrey de Baudricourt, and I hail from the independent Duchy of Lorraine. It borders with France. In my time period, the 1590s, it is an independent and sovereign state ruled by a duke, for whom I am the ambassador to this kingdom.
My name's Earl de Vries. I am a 14th century Welsh mercenary fighting in Italy right now under Sir John Hawkwood. What drew me to the SCA was the same thing that drew most of us, the romance, the fighting, and I just wanted to learn to be able to kick people's butts, and that's what I did. I learned how to fight. I became a knight. I won Crown Tournament one time and actually was able to be king. And I met my wife in this, and we've been married 28 years, and I've been in the SCA for 34 years.
So my name is Ayla Stevensdottir, and my persona is it's 13th century, right? 14th century, sorry. 14th century. And my mom actually chose this persona because she was the first one in here, and then I came on, and then I started doing it, and then that's why we chose 14th century.
My name is Ameline Dubois. I'm also known when I'm dressed in Viking, because I have more than one persona. I've got several, because I like to expand my sewing techniques and my artistic techniques. And so I've got Viking personas, I've got Italian personas, I've got an English persona, but my name generally pretty much stays the same with that. But I started in the SCA, and I wanted to do more like the 15th century Italian, because I live in Texas and it's hot, and their clothes were much more amenable to that kind of flowy. We didn't have to wear a lot of headwear. We could some veils, but most of the time we could just have loose hair. Not something in this huge Italian, big Russian outfit, or some of the Russian outfits are amazing. You might know, I like to sew. I like to make clothes. I like to do things for people, and that's what I generally do in the SCA, is I do artistic abilities, and I sew for people. I do glass work. I do some metalworking and jewelry making. So there's a lot of things that you can do in the SCA. The fun parts about it is learning about all the different styles of what different cultures did and what kind of motifs that they did, whether they were Norse influenced, whether they were Viking influenced, whether they were more Italian, whether they were more English, whether they were German. So you can look at paintings and you can look at time frames, and you can see how the northern influences just disseminated through many different cultures, and you can see how more southern influences disseminated through. And it's just very interesting to see how all the styles worked out for artistic abilities and in their clothes.
So I chose Sylvana Corwin. It's a nice name, like the way it sounded. Back in my role-playing days, that was one of my favorite characters. I chose the name that way, and so I figured I'd continue it on into the SCA. My persona I've chosen is 14th century English, mostly because I like the style of clothing. I also like the trade routes and stuff that happen at that point. So I can get away with wearing some French or some Burgundian, depending on just kind of the blending of things.
So Dante is my persona. I do rapier, so I fight in this. I was actually fighting in this tournament earlier, and well, I'm pretty new to it, I guess. I'm not a novice. I've been doing it for about 2 years now. It's fun. I've been in the SCA for a while before I started fencing because my parents were in it, so I kind of born into it. So, but what really drew my interest was sword fighting.
Yeah, my name is Brandon Adkins. I'm an accounting manager. I'm 24 years old, so I work for a pretty big franchise company in the mundane world.
Okay, and out there in the world, I'm Don Sims, and I am software support for FedEx.
I'm David Whitaker, and I run a vacuum induction furnace here at the foundry at Arconic Wichita Falls, and we make airplane turbine blades, and I've been doing that for 34 years.
I am 12 years old, and what I do when I'm not in the SCA, I'm usually in school, middle school, 6th grade, or I would be drawing, because I love drawing, or just watching YouTube.
My name is Amy Rich, and I run a plumbing wholesale company. I sell plumbing parts.
So mundanely, I'm Rachel Schubert. I am a stay-at-home mom, and the SCA is pretty much what I do.
I am 19. I pretty much do what a normal person of my age, at least what I think, does. Mostly just hang around, play games, watch TV, talk to friends.
Yeah, I originally joined the SCA for archery. I wanted to kind of emulate Legolas Greenleaf from Lord of the Rings and kind of play that game a little bit more, but I saw the rapier fighting, which is fighting with actual swords, and that piqued my interest from real life. And when I jumped in and got engaged in it, it just showed an incredible opportunity to display amounts of honor and valor and chivalry that all of this media that we consume, and well, maybe not Game of Thrones, but things in that time allowed people to portray that we don't necessarily get to show on a day-to-day basis. And I love that the SCA lets us practice that and take a step back into the time that's a little more courteous, with Victorian ideals placed on a Renaissance and medieval.
Swords. Errol Flynn. All of the stuff that kids grow up, at least in my generation, watching Errol Flynn, all those old movies, and then you find out there's this group of people that do this. So I've been doing this for 26 years.
The thing that really gets me about the SCA is you get friends that are all over the country. I have friends that are from coast to coast that if I run into trouble, I can call them. And we all sleep in tents. And I've got armor that's worth $2,000. We don't lock these tents. There's no theft. I lost a wallet one time with $400 in it. And I found it at Lost and Found. Hours later, all the money's still in it. And you just, it's a sense of family. It's a really strong sense of family that you don't get normally.
Rapier fighting is one of my passions. I love doing rapier fighting. I've been doing it for maybe like 5 years now, and I've done it a lot. And I've won a lot of I've won a lot of tournaments, and it's really fun. I get to know people too. I get to know other people while I'm doing rapier.
I think the interesting thing about the SCA is that no matter what you're really interested in, whether you like clothing, whether you like fighting, whether you like metalwork, whether you like blacksmithing, there is something in the SCA that you would find interesting.
My father was the one who actually found out about it, and I was 16 at my first ever event, and then it just kind of, we quit going. We didn't stick with it. And then when I graduated high school and I joined the Navy, I had a roommate who happened to be in the SCA, just randomly, because we're everywhere.
What I find interesting is that so many different personas can mingle together, and everyone plays it up and role plays with it, which is always fun and good, enjoying to watch.
That was really interesting to hear. It brings up a lot of questions. It was fun. The first one is that when we heard from each of those people the first time, they're supers. or their real name, and you all are picking other identities. Is that correct? And here's a better question. Were those names made up, or are they historical names?
For the most part, the names that we pick for the personas we're taking on are actually historical.
Really?
You can go through a process to research and register your name so that no one else uses the exact same thing.
No.
And it's all taken from historical documents that show, yes, these names were in use during that time period.
Wow.
So,
and you can pick one and take it as your own.
Yes.
If somebody else comes in, it's off with their head.
Not quite, but it does. When we do something special that the King or Queen want to award us for and give us recognition, it makes sure that recognition goes to the right person.
Wow, very interesting. These seem like perfectly regular people.
Perfectly regular people.
And you perfectly regular people. This is just your hobby.
Yes.
And but you're deep into it.
Very, very deep. Yes, yes, sir.
It's very, very interesting. I'm trying to think of now the other things I heard. Oh, some of the costumes. I mean, y'all's costumes. But the one guy with the hat, the helmet, first guy, Brent was his name maybe. I think. Where do you get that type of thing?
That, much like the swords, there's vendors that sell them. There are people that make them.
Yes.
We have a lot of people that get into blacksmithing and actually create those helmets
Really?
themselves. Some of those are very elaborate jobs. We're talking $1,500 for some of the really nice ones.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like just a wonderful social event too. You people know others from around the country.
We know people from around the country. We know people from around the world.
Well, now take that out. How far is this everywhere?
The SCA is worldwide. It is a worldwide organization. We are located on 6 continents.
Wow.
There are groups as far flung as the Arctic Circle and Antarctica. We have had groups on U.S. naval warships.
Wow.
There are groups in Thailand and Russia, Israel, all throughout Europe. We have a group in Cape Town, South Africa.
Isn't that amazing? How many members worldwide, you know?
Not even a clue.
Okay. I peeked at your website. It said 30,000.
Okay, I was going to say, at this point, I don't know.
And all I would say on that is that's 30,000 paid members. That's not including all the people that may not have memberships or are just associated with.
Okay.
So I'd imagine the number's quite a bit bigger. One thing that's just, to me, it's the neatest thing of all, is that one of our members actually was on and claimed the International Space Station for the Kingdom, which is Texas and Oklahoma.
Was an astronaut.
So, yes.
No kidding. Isn't that fascinating? Now, I have a note here to ask about why some people on their costumes wear a book hanging off of their belt.
For some people and some cultures, books were extraordinarily valuable. As much so as gold and jewels.
No kidding.
There were no printing presses at the time. So everything was made by hand. And so to receive a book, generally they were probably prayer books, Bibles, things along those lines. To have that was a sign of wealth for that person.
Isn't that something? And today, books seem common to us.
Yes.
Any street corner, any library, you can go and get a book. Very valuable then. What other things have surprised you about that time period and value of things?
I think the biggest one for me is just how much more than we realized all the different societies interacted much earlier than we knew. How far that the Roman Empire spread. How much trade there was between China and Europe long before you ever hear about that when you're going through elementary or junior high school. The world was a much more cosmopolitan place than we give it credit for, and I find that tremendously fascinating.
Interesting. We've talked about books and research and learning. Can you just walk in and say, I'm here, or do you have to do something a certain amount of research? You create your persona, obviously, but what do you have to do to get in?
You don't even have to create your persona to get in. If you're interested, you come out and see us anywhere, any group, and say, hey, I'm interested in this. This looks neat. we'll help you out. We'll help you put you in garb. We will help you find the area of interest for you personally.
Right.
I've helped quite a few people look into creating a name for themselves by saying, okay, what part of history do you want to look at, time-wise, and what area, and then we'll narrow it down.
Okay.
So
if I don't want to go to a meeting right away, and we'll get to that in just a second, but I want to just sort of start to tug at that thread, what would I do as far as research?
You can research the organization itself through sca.org, or you can find locally us on Facebook at Shire of Bradley, and we also have my personal email address for my office.
Okay.
And just kind of getting in touch with us, we talk, we find your interests.
Okay.
And we slowly just bring you in as fast or as slow as you want to come.
Okay. So you don't have to come in with anything in specific. There's a guidance.
We have complete guidance on this. We help people find their way through it. We have loaner equipment so that they don't even are required to have their own garb. We have loaner things to loan, to give them, so that they can come to their first event and fit in.
Oh, not standing in the corner in jeans and a
Yes.
T-shirt. You're going to successfully bring them in.
Yes.
Very interesting. Well, since the Kemp Center is an art facility, talk about art in that time frame. What does that mean to that time frame?
The SCA and the arts are very, very intertwined. I like to tell people who are new and who come in, give me a hobby that you like to do.
Oh.
Give me a hobby that a family member would do. Say your grandmother crocheted or knitted. We would probably have a medieval equivalent. Do you like to do woodworking? Do you like to do leatherworking? Do you like to blacksmith? Do you like to cook? Are you interested in music, dance, painting? We have people who do it all. Anything that was done in the Middle Ages, we strive to recreate now in that manner.
Okay.
So for us, art is extraordinarily important.
Shoot down any misconceptions.
Wow.
Or all of them, since there must be some.
I'm sure there are. Biggest misconception, I guess, is, I'm not even sure what to say the biggest misconception is. I don't want people to think that it's a violent and bloody sport we play on the physical side, that you're going to walk away with broken bones and on a regular basis. It's all controlled. We do everything we can to be safe. It's not choreographed. I know you brought up the colonial and Civil War thing several times in this. All of that is, they've got specific roles and it's choreographed very carefully. This is live action. This is a sport.
Okay.
I'm not saying there's no chance whatsoever that, you might get some bruises. But what we're doing is meant to be a sport. It's not meant to seriously hurt anybody, and we're very careful in what we do. What would you say your biggest misconception you want to throw off is?
I suppose that a lot of people look at us and they wonder if there's a fantasy sort of aspect to it. And there are several other groups that do have fantasy aspects to them. We are not. We are strictly a not-for-profit historical recreational organization. Our focus is on education and recreation.
Okay. And how do they get in touch with you?
And I think they flashed it up there once, but they can contact us on our Facebook page, which is Shire Bradley. They can contact her directly at the Hospitaler's email address, and she'll be happy to set them up with things.
Okay.
On a broader scale, if somebody ends up seeing this that's not right here in Wichita Falls, they can look for the Kingdom of Ansteora on the website. And there's actually ansteora.org is the website for the Texas and Oklahoma area.
Fascinating. Well, you guys really just look like you had a great time at the weekend event.
It was a blast.
It very much was.
And how often, I may have asked this already, but how often do you meet here?
once a month business meetings, and then we have practices for the combat several times during a month.
All right.
Plus cooking guild for people that like to cook.
Yes.
We've got different arts and science things going on.
Okay.
As it fits people's schedules. So,
well, I'm about to wrap it up. Any final thoughts? Anything I missed? From either of you? Just come join us.
Come and join us. Come see us.
You'll find something you like.
I like the part you said about, what are your hobbies, what are the things that interest you, and then rather than forcing something, you can get something that somebody's interested in already.
I tell people that I can give them the medieval equivalent of their hobby down to playing video games.
Wow.
But instead of sitting behind the controller, we can put you in armor and let you do it for real.
That is a perfect way to end. Thank you, Mr. Kane and Ms. Taylor for the Society for Creative Anachronism, Shire Bradley.
Yes.
That's our local area. Okay, here in Wichita Falls. And thank you for joining us on this virtual tour. Special thanks to KFDX for making this possible. Join us again next year as we focus on art and how it benefits from math. Thanks again.